I'm going to ask you to tell us your full name.
My full name?
Yes.
Well, Ruth Eleanor Glenn Weaver.
Eleanor Glenn?
Yes. Glenn was my maiden name.
Uh-huh. Okay. And so you retained that. You retained your maiden name. And the Eleanor was from who? Where did you get the Eleanor from?
My mother.
Was that her
When
name?
she named me. My name, no. My mother's name was Elizabeth.
Uh-huh.
Elizabeth Brown.
Oh, but she gave you the name Eleanor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me about your mother. You mentioned her. Tell me about her.
Oh, my mother was a wonderful person. She was a very hardworking woman. We lived on a farm. There were 12 kids. My father was a farmer.
You were one of 12?
I was one of 12. And
how different from your husband's experience being
yes,
an only child.
Right.
Wow.
But then there wasn't any money.
No. Tell me, where were you in the birth order?
I was fourth to the youngest.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yep. And my father died when I was 6 years old. And it was pretty tough for my mother.
Where was the farm?
We lived in Rome, Pennsylvania. Small town, very small. And where was the place? It was in this little town of Rome, Pennsylvania.
Yes. Yes. Okay. With your father being a farmer, he had long days. He worked very hard.
Yes. We had cows, 12 cows. And they had to be milked. It's not like today, where it's done by machines. They all had to be done by hand in the morning and again at night.
So everybody pitched in with that? Or was that only certain people in the family had certain jobs to do?
Yes. My older brother, he had to help a lot around the farm.
Around the farm?
Yeah.
Was it a dairy farm, Ruth, or is it?
Mostly, but my father raised crops too. I can't remember too much because I was only 6, but I remember him going off to fields and plowing them.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes taking some of us younger kids along.
Right.
On
the track, was there a tractor involved here, or
no?
No, a horse and a plow.
Horse and a plow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever ride on the plow with Dad when he was doing that, or was that too dangerous?
I don't remember riding on a plow. I remember riding in the back of a wagon.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's great. Those are great memories. Tell me about the your brothers and sisters. If you were one of the younger ones, there were a majority of your siblings that were older than you. Can you tell me their names, starting from the oldest?
Oh, yes.
And tell me something about each one of them?
Well, there were 8 girls and 4 boys. Uh-huh. The oldest was Agnes. And Agnes became a teacher. And then there was May, and May was a teacher too.
Oh.
But May died when she was young. She was only 25.
Mm-hmm.
She was confined to bed with the arthritis.
My.
Yeah. And then in those days, they couldn't do much about it. Oh. Then Dorothy was next. And Dorothy was a buyer. She became a buyer in department stores. And she got sick of that job. When the war broke out, she thought she would make a change and go overseas. She joined the WACs.
You're talking about World War II here, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking that maybe she would be sent overseas. And they put her in the charge of the PX in Bainbridge, Georgia, because she had the experience of being a buyer. Yes. Then there was Henry.
So she didn't get overseas.
No.
She ended up in the PX in Georgia.
Yeah. Then she couldn't wait for the war to be over. And my brother Henry, he went to college, and I don't exactly know what his position was, but he worked for a bank in New York City for a long time. And then there was Henry Hardy, my sister Hardy. And after Henry we didn't get to college. There just wasn't money for it.
Okay.
And so then Hardy, and then Ida, and Hardy had a Bill.
What did Hardy? He went to college. Hardy went to college.
Hardy is a girl.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Hartie.
Hartie. Hardy. Okay.
It's a family name.
I see.
And
It's when you say a family name, it's a name that has passed down through the generations.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a very common name.
No, I've never heard it before.
No.
And what did Hartie did not go to school, or she?
She had 1 year of college, but
and then
couldn't finish. No, there just wasn't the money.
I understand.
And after Hardy, there was Ida, and Ida didn't go on to school either, and she got married. And Ida, Bill, another brother. Bill was in the Navy, and
was Bill old enough to serve during World War II?
World War II. And Bill, Catherine. I had 3 of my sisters were blind. They had a disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And Hardy was one of them.
Oh, my.
And Catherine was another one. And then a younger girl, Susan. And there was, after Bill, Catherine. She became blind when she was about 12.
Oh, dear.
But she was educated well because she was sent to the R.O.B.S School for Blind in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, I think it is. And so she had typing skills, and she learned things like that, and she did get an office job, which was very good for her. Wonderful. And she married a man from the office. Then after Catherine was myself, and after I finished high school, I worked 2 years, and then I went into nurses training because I'd always wanted to be a nurse from the time I was a little kid.
Is that right? You were one of those little girls who dreamed about being a nurse and took care of her dolls and then actually became a nurse.
I guess so.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there were 2 younger than I, Susan, and Susan became blind too, and then Johnny. Johnny was killed in the war, and, well, not really. He was at Pearl Harbor when they bombed. He was in the Navy.
This is your brother Johnny was
My brother Johnny, the youngest of the family. But he wasn't hurt in the war. After the war, he re-enlisted, and they sent him to, he was over in England, and it was a Jeep accident.
You survived the Pearl Harbor, the war,
Yep.
Only to be killed in a Jeep
accident. And then I didn't mention my brother Montague, the year younger than I. And he was killed in an accident too while he was in high school. Yeah. So that's 2 boys, but there are still 2 boys left and 6 girls. 6 girls are getting old.
Now, let me ask you how often you see them. They must be spread out all over the country.
Oh, they are. I see my sister Ida more often than the others because she lives in New Jersey and every so often down near the shore. But my other family, Agnes is in upstate New York. My 2 sisters are in Elmira. Another sister is in a retirement home in Philadelphia. And the 2 boys are still up there in around in Towanda, Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania, where we were born.
Oh, actually, so they stayed in the same area.
Well, not really. My brother, I forget where he was, but he moved back there. And my brother Bill was also he was in the Navy. And now he's back there in Towanda.
What happened to the farm?
Well, it finally, we just couldn't keep it up. My mother couldn't, and it was sold.
After your father died?
Yes, right.
Okay. Did you have any nicknames growing up, Ruth? your brothers and sisters call you by anything other than Ruth or Ruthie?
Well, in the family, they called me Ruthie. But I got the nickname Rudy, Rudie, when I was young, maybe about 7 or 8 years old. And that kind of stuck. I mean, the other school, my school friends called me that, yes. And also while I was in nurses training, the friends that I made there.
Now, Fred was telling me that your son lives on the island so that you have opportunity to see him more often than you do.
Right.
From a mother's perspective, tell me about your son.
Well, I think he's a wonderful boy. He's always been thoughtful. He's never given us much of any trouble. Nothing very great, you know. Just been a very wonderful boy.
For those people who will see your interview, but they won't have seen Fred's yet, perhaps we should mention the names of the children. So your son's name and your daughter's name.
Oh.
Yeah.
My son's name is Philip.
And he has one child.
Yes.
And he is married.
It's married, and
his child's name and his wife's name.
His wife's name is Darlene, and our granddaughter is Brooke.
Okay. I'm going to ask you again the same kind of questions that I'll ask Fred, but you have your own take on these, so that I'd be anxious to hear. Your grandchild, Brooke, is an individual, I understand. How would you describe the qualities of this young person?
Well, I don't know exactly what to say. She's a very bright child, and she certainly has a lot more advantages than what we had as children.
Oh, I would say, yes.
And she's a busy little girl. It's, just one thing after another.
How old is Brooke?
Brooke will be 10 in September.
Okay, so she is then
She'll be going into 5th grade.
I was going to say well into 4th or 5th grade, yes. With, I take it, a lot of interests.
A lot of interests?
Yes, she does have a lot of different interests then.
Seems to.
Yeah.
Well, with the parents both working, that makes more, I don't know whether you'd call them opportunities or not, but there's before school activity and also after school activity that she attends. And then she's taking cello lessons, and she's been in soccer and softball.
That's the
busy child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you were talking about Philip, and you were saying that that certainly he has given you many reasons to be proud. Was Philip always interested in the same things growing up, or did he have different interests that evolved as he matured? Did you see him changing in his interests, the things that he was?
Well,
now you lived in Brentwood, so he went to the Brentwood Schools.
Right. He was always interested in sports, and
like his father.
Like his father, I think that that probably fostered it. But when he got into junior high, he didn't have the height for basketball, and he didn't have the weight for football. It's a slight build, so he went out for wrestling.
Okay.
So,
and
I didn't like that.
No. Well, Mom, that's what I would expect you to say, quite frankly. Yes, I would. I was asking Fred about his own maternal and paternal heritage. Your family, your mom and dad, and all of your brothers and sisters grew up on a farm. The last name, your father's last name was what again?
Glenn.
Do you know the background of the history of the family at all? Are you aware of?
No, not really.
They're native born, though. He was native born, right? He was born in this country.
That I'm not sure of. I've heard different things from my older sisters,
Yes.
and they said that he was in an orphanage and he ran away, and that these people in Rome took him and he worked on the farm for them. Then when they passed on, the farm became his.
I see.
And my mother was real Yankee. She was born there, and that's where she met my father, where my father met her. And
so her roots are
right,
strictly Yankee. They go way back too.
right, yeah.
Okay. Within your own your family of siblings, you saw many different kinds of abilities and talents expressed by your sisters and brothers. And then, of course, Fred, being an only child, could not make the same comparisons. But when you look at your children, do you see any of the family traits that are shown up, interest besides the sports that are being expressed? What about the music? Was there anyone else? Your grandchild is now taking lessons. Is that something that you would say as a family?
Well, our daughter played the flute, and I played piano.
All right.
But
okay,
that's about it.
Yes. Now you were born in Pennsylvania, weren't you?
Yes.
Can I want to ask if I can be so bold as to ask when you were born?
I was born in 1918. And in those days, it was such a small town. You had the one doctor, the horse and buggy doctor.
Yes.
And he came to the house to deliver the children. No
hospital. This is before hospitals. This was when delivery was at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I suspect that given the fact that there were a family of 12, this was not such a terribly unusual event. It had happened before by the time it happened with you. Ruth, what are some of your earliest childhood memories?
Well, I'm trying to think. My father, I don't know whether you've ever heard of the R.O.B.S organization.
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Well, my father belonged to that. And when he died, my mother had offers for people offered to take different ones of us into their homes. But my mother said no, she wanted us all to be together. And there happened to be this Oddfellows home in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. And the 8 youngest of us children went there. And the 4 were too older. You had to be at least 3 or not over 12. And then you couldn't be admitted to this orphanage or Oddfellows home. And so that's where the 8 youngest of us went. And I remember that very well. I remember the day I went. But it was really, we had a great childhood.
Tell me about what you remember of that day, though, the day that you went there.
All I remember is, I remember the dress I wore. And I remember when we got out of the car, there were some swings there. And I sat on that swing. That's what?
Yes.
That's what I remember about going that day. I don't remember anything else about it.
Now, does that mean that the 8 of you from that point on were separated from your mother?
Yes, yes. But the one thing that I think was very good about it, too, was the fact that my mother did not have to worry about how she was going to feed and clothe all of us children.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. And we did have a good education. We had our own high school there. We had a band. We had an orchestra. A lot of us had piano lessons. And with the band, the boys got the instruments. There was an orchestra. Girls learned to play the violin. There weren't many children there. There were about 200 when we were there. And there weren't many children there who did not learn to play an instrument.
Oh, wonderful.
Right.
And your memories of that time were positive memories. You said you
Oh,
had a
yes.
wonderful childhood.
Yes, we did. We had a good education. We had our own high school.
Now, did you have visits with Mom? Did she?
Well, of course, in those days there wasn't a car available, and she never learned how to drive. So she tried to get to see us at least twice a year.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And it wasn't easy. She'd have to pay somebody to take her.
Yes. Well, let's see, Ruth. You were how old now when your dad died?
I was 6.
Well, that's you did mention that before.
So I was there from 6 until I was 18. I started school there and I finished school there.
With such a large family, you must have had certainly more than one role model among your brothers and sisters. What can you point to that you say you learned from this brother or that sister? There are certain things that you learned by watching them or by imitating them. Is there anything that would apply?
I don't really think so.
Okay.
I think we all had the same goals.
Okay.
We all wished we could go to college, but
yes, but the money didn't allow it at that time. Were there now obviously other adults came into your life when you took up residence with your brothers and sisters in this good Oddfellows home? Do you remember any of the people who were there that cared for you and nurtured you?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely.
Did you stay in touch with them later on after?
Yes. My home ec teacher, we corresponded. The music teacher and I corresponded. And, of course, all the boys and girls that were there in your age group.
They become like family, I guess.
Oh, definitely.
Family, very close bonds must be
formed. It was, yes. They used to say we were one big happy family, and we used to sneer at that, because we thought, but it was true.
It was
true. And they still have a reunion every year at Labor Day.
Is that right?
Although I think right about now, it's probably not going to last too much longer.
Well, because people are getting on.
Yes, right. And a lot have passed on. Yeah.
Who most influenced your choice to go into nursing? Was that something that you mentioned you knew very early on? That's what you wanted to do.
Right. I knew from the time I was maybe 7 or 8 years old that I wanted to be a nurse. And I can remember some of us kids had to, they had a doctor that came out from the nearest town, and he'd look in our throats and say whether you needed your tonsils out.
Yes.
And I can remember going to this hospital and having my tonsils out, but I can remember looking around. I was 6 years old and wondering what was the matter with all those other people in the pits.
Now, you experienced a career shift, though. I mean, after having gone into nursing and achieved that objective, then somewhere along the road you decided to take the next curve and you went into teaching.
Well, the opportunity presented itself, and I had stayed home with my 2 children until this opportunity came up, and it was to be a school nurse teacher.
I see.
So that's, but in order to have the job, you see, the nursing education I had was what they called a diploma school. It was a 3-year training period. And in order to have the job, the State Department required certain courses that you should take. And you had to get so many credits in so many years. In 5 years, you had to get 30 for your provisional certification, and then go on for your permanent certification. And that's how I got to college, and I really enjoyed it.
So was that when you were living in Brentwood at the time?
Yes.
So you went to local colleges then?
Right. I skipped around. I never
Stayed with
matriculated. I didn't
okay.
matriculate.
What were some of the schools you attended on the island then?
Well, I went to Dowling.
Uh-huh.
It was, no, it was called Adelphi East. It became Dowling.
I see.
That's it. And then I took some courses at C.W. Post. And I can't remember.
Okay.
But I did skip around.
But
took the ones I wanted.
Right, when they were available, and then ultimately you were certified. And were you doing this while you were working as a nurse teacher and
Yes.
to meet the requirements as so many other people did
I
in those
know.
days?
Yes. Yeah.
Because teachers were very hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And so the agreements were made that as long as you're heading toward this objective, you can be teaching while you're going to school, which meant you were a very busy lady.
Yes, it was, you know, with a home and a family.
Yeah.
And then the some of the courses were, I would have to double up with two, say maybe 4:30 to 6.
Oh, boy.
And then one 6 to 8.
Do you drive?
I do now, but I didn't then.
You didn't then?
No.
Oh, so you were dependent then upon somebody driving you to and from and so on.
Right.
Which made it even more difficult. But then by the same token, what an object lesson for people who have excuses why they can't do this. That. If you want to do something, you do it, don't you?
This is right. In fact, well, I come to think of it, I was driving but I hadn't driven a car until I had that, took the job. That was in 1962.
Okay.
2 or 3. 1962, I think.
So that became your motivation then to get a license and to
Oh, yeah.
and to become more independent.
Yes.
All right. Who were some of your high school or elementary school friends? Can you remember any of the names of from the home where you were living and the people you went to school with?
You mean the teachers or
your buddies, your
my
friends.
buddies? Oh, yes, I had. In fact, I still correspond with one. Her name is Pauline, and she lives in Florida now, retired. And she and I used to play piano duets together. And oh yeah, there are quite a few. There's Almeida. She's been in Florida, but now she's just gone to a retirement home in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And there's another one who lives up near my brother's there in Towanda, and her name was Arlene, but everybody had a nickname there at the home.
Yes.
And she had red hair, so she was nicknamed Fritz. Okay. And Fritz and I still correspond. I used to go up every year, and in the fall, because it was so beautiful up there with the foliage.
Oh, I'll bet.
And it's all such a beautiful country.
That has to strike a chord too somewhere deep down in you because of those early experiences of growing up on a farm and so on. That
yes,
to be close to all of that, to the to nature and the beauty of the changing seasons.
Yeah, and it always gave me an opportunity then to see. I would see Fritz, and I would also see my brothers, and I would see my 2 sisters, and possibly the oldest sister I would get to see too.
It's a wonderful thing to have relationships with people that have known you for as long as those people.
Oh yes, yes.
It's we live at a time and in a society where things change so rapidly, but to be able to talk with somebody who you've known the better part of your life and has known you,
yes,
is a real privilege. Because they can mirror things about you that you have long since forgotten, and then you remember when they tell you certain things.
Yeah. No, we go back a long ways. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that when your father died at age 6, all of you had been living on the farm. I wonder if you can describe the room where you slept back then. Do you remember?
I am not too sure, but I remember being in... It must have been a bed that opened up. But I can remember being in that bed, it was very low. It wasn't a real bed. It was something that opened up and made more room.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the only thing I remember. Because I remember I had a nightmare one night and I was cried out that the bears were running around the house.
Yes. Okay.
Not in the house, out
Yes,
on the outside. I remember that.
And was your experience when after your father died and the farm was sold and you moved with your brothers and sisters, do you remember that bedroom was it a dormitory type setting, or was it a private room, or?
You mean at the Oddfellows?
Yes, yes.
Oh, dormitory. And we had wonderful times in that dormitory. It was like having a trampoline. We'd run over the beds. You know, there's about 12 beds in each.
It's a wonder anybody got to sleep. Well, were you assigned when you were living there to do chores or to be responsible for certain things?
We each had a chore to do.
Everybody had to carry their load, right?
Oh, yes.
And what did you have to do?
Well, it was changed. The work schedule was changed every so often. So that as you got older, you either waited on tables in the children's dining room, or else you waited on tables in the adults' dining room. And you had dishes to do. And these were all in the beds, the dormitories. There were all these different...
housekeeping chores.
Right, the housekeeping. Mm-hmm.
Now, how old were you when you took your first paying job, the first job for which you made money?
Oh, I was 18, because I worked 2 years before I went into nurses training, and it was during the Depression. This was 1936. The Depression, and with the type of education, we weren't, I mean, I had was college preparatory courses, so the only work I could get was housework, and that's what I did for 2 years before I went to nurse, just to save the money.
Sure. It would seem to me that during the Depression, to be doing housework and being paid for it, you must have worked for people who were comfortable.
Yes, and then also it was, I can't think of the word I want, but you lived in. Yeah.
Okay.
So, of course, that saved your room and board.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they had children. And, of course, you had some responsibilities toward those children.
Oh, so you were also like a nanny then, doing
in a way
responsibilities.
It wasn't too bad, though, because they were usually around.
Yeah.
The parents.
Would this have been in Pennsylvania, Ruth?
No. The first place was in Pennsylvania. And I stayed there 6 months. And then I went to my brothers and sisters, several of them were in New Jersey and Newark, and had an apartment. And I left the place in Pennsylvania and went to New Jersey, and I got a job in East Orange. Same type of work, housework.
From any time during your childhood, can you recall a holiday that had particular significance or that was important to you?
Well, I remember Christmas at the home. And let's see, not too much else. I mean, that were important.
Yes.
All right.
What kind of a kid were you?
Kind of a kid was I?
How would you describe yourself as a youngster? What kind of a kid were you?
Well, I loved the outdoors, and always taking walks, and we had a lot of freedom there. It was in the country, and we would walk up over the hills, and we knew these trails and these places. We knew where all the apple trees were, and the pear trees, and well, we just loved being outside. Yeah, and I can remember some of the books I read. Gene Stratton Porter. Do you remember that author?
I must confess I don't.
Well, I remember reading her books, and I just loved them because they were about the outdoors. And then there were Campfire Girl
Oh,
books.
those I remember. Those I remember.
Yep, that I read
And
because
the Bobbsey Twins.
yes, yes,
And Tom Swift, and there were a whole series of books there.
yeah.
That was before television, and in some instances, even before radio.
Right. Well, later on, when we were in our teens, we did have radio, and but we weren't able to turn it on. They had a speaker into the what we called the living room, really. And on Sunday morning, we used to hear the children's hour from New York City, and then our band played there at one time.
Oh,
Yep, and that was a big deal.
I'll bet. Yes.
They had been invited. They went to New York City to play.
Do you have a favorite season of the year, or did you?
Oh, I love this fall.
The fall.
Yes.
Yeah.
The leaves are turning, and I like the way the air smells, and it's a little crisp. You know, I don't like summer when it's hot and humid.
Yes.
But I did love well, I still do. Yeah.
One of the things, and I know that there's a positive and a negative to this, but one of the aromas that brings me back to my teen years is the smell of burning leaves. We don't smell that anymore.
No, I remember that. Yeah, no, of course, so they don't permit it because it's smog.
And the environment and people with respiratory problems and so on.
Right.
But that was a sure sign of fall when you could smell
the
leaves.
It smelled so good.
Yes, it did. Yes. Yeah. If you weren't allergic to it.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite toy or toys at certain points in your growing up?
I can remember
what an attachment to, you know.
I had some dolls, but I don't think that any of them were that much important. But I can remember when I was maybe 6, 7, I liked to play with blocks, but I would make rooms. I was always interested in making rooms with these blocks. I don't know whether it was the home that made me feel that way, but I would sort out a place for the living room, the dining room, and the hall. And well, not the door.
These are the kind of generational toys, though, that seem to speak to each generation. The blocks. Blocks are an institutional of childhood, and I said, I guess for very good reason. I mean, there you are. Yeah. What about the aromas that bring you back to times past? Are there any other smells that when you get a whiff of this or that, you think of?
Oh yes. Smell of the lilies of the valley and the wild roses. I can still smell those.
Goes back to what part of your life now?
To the part when we were in the home.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, we roamed all over, and I can still see these little rose bushes, wild rose bushes.
Let's see. When you have answered a lot of these questions that I'm looking through here, so I'm going to just pass over them. Favorite subjects when you were in school?
Oh, I liked English. I always liked English.
You like to write? Is that what it was, or is just you like to read?
I just like the
teacher,
the work, the teacher, and I like to parse sentences.
Okay.
I always liked that. I liked learning. Enjoyed learning.
That I'm glad you said that, because there are some people who have that connection with schools, with libraries. There's an excitement about it. Not everything attached to it, but there's an overall attachment, a love of it. Now, I seem to recall that you came to Brentwood around 1955.
Yes.
But one of the things that I didn't talk with you about was how you happened to bump into Fred. And how did you guys get connected?
Oh, well, it was a blind date, and I was in nurses training, and I had a date with another fellow, and he asked me if I could get a date for somebody else. And I said, sure. I mean, nurses home was full of people, you know.
Yes.
Hey, do you want a date tonight? Sure, you know. And I can still remember asking that. We were on the elevator going off duty, and a bunch of kids in the elevator, and I said, hey, anybody want a date tonight? Yeah, sure. So got a date for Fred, and I was with the other guy. And that's how I met him.
Where were you on duty? Is that a hospital you were working in at the time, or
Oh, yes, yes.
where was that?
In Sayre, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
See, it wasn't far from, well, it was in the same county as where I was born.
Okay.
Northern Pennsylvania. Yeah. And it was a small place.
What year might that have been? Was that in the 40s? That you?
I entered nurses training in 38 and finished in 41.
So it was in the beginning of the 40s that you met Fred then?
Yeah, it was really my last year in 41.
Oh, okay, 41.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so he is with the other girl, and you're with another guy,
Mm-hmm.
and you dated that night, and something obviously sparked someplace.
I guess you would say that.
And then from that point on, how long was it before you tied the knot?
It wasn't too long.
Mm.
No. It was, it's maybe 6-7 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you married in the...
Because that was the year I graduated, see. And then
41?
I was working in 41,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And I was working in the hospital.
Oh boy. So the year that you get married, then, if my chronology is correct, on December 7th, we go to war.
Yes. I wanted to join the Navy, but with the 2 boys in the service and my sister in the wax,
Oh, yeah.
I thought my mother had enough to worry about. When I look back on it, I think, one more wouldn't have made that much difference. But instead, I got married.
Yeah, your life would have been very different today. Had
Oh,
you done
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 1955, after having been married in 41, and I know Fred's work took him around quite a bit, and finally brought him to the interview in the district. I assume that you were in Jersey at the time that Fred interviewed for the job here.
No, we were living in Phelps, New York.
Oh, you were?
Yes. Originally, we lived in Waverly, where he had been teaching. And then we moved to the Phelps, which is up near Rochester.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we moved to Newton, New Jersey.
So when you came to Brentwood to live...
we were living in Newton.
You were living in Newton?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a nice place.
And who made the deal on the house in Brentwood? Did you do that together, or did Fred come down and see the house and decide?
He came down and decided, but we did take a weekend to come down and look for a place to live.
Uh-huh. And the house that you bought on Brentwood Road is the house where you still live today?
Yes. And it had just been built, and it was, so readily accessible to the school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You could walk, for goodness sake.
Oh, it
was within
definitely. I used to walk a lot, yeah.
Now, when the job possibility opened up for you in this district in becoming a nurse teacher, did you go through an interview process for that?
Did I what?
Go through an interview process. Did somebody interview you?
Well, not exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It so happened that, we knew Hoyts.
Yes.
And we knew Tom Hastings.
Who was at Central Administration.
Yes, and he was in charge of pupil personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me if I wanted the job.
Okay, and that was that.
That was it.
That's the way it was done in those days.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Uh, Now, what were your first impressions of this town and of the district when you first arrived here?
Well,
It was rural, wasn't it?
it was rural, yes. And on Brentwood Road, where we live and where we lived then, there was a vast expanse between Brentwood and Bayshore until they started building all the developments. We had to go to Bayshore to do our grocery shopping. There wasn't anything here. There were no supermarkets. Pretty soon they had an A&P, though.
It was Kohler's Market was here.
Yeah, Kohler's, yes. But, you know, it was a little more expensive than the supermarket.
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah. But they had one over in Bayshore called, I don't know, Stop and Shop or something like that. And the stuff went on a conveyor belt to the outside and you picked it up.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Now, was Brentwood Road a paved road at the time we're talking about?
I think so. It wasn't dirt.
It must have been difficult in the wintertime when there was a heavy snowfall, though, to get from one place, to get to Bayshore, for example.
Well, you know what? I still remember when we first moved here and we had a snowfall, there was this little man who used to come and shovel the walks. He had a kind of a snowplow thing, just a small thing that he pushed. And he came along and shoveled the walks.
Is that right?
Yes, yes.
For a few dollars or whatever.
No. He was hired, I think, by the town.
Oh, he was an official snow clearer.
Yes. I had never seen that anywhere else, and I was quite surprised, you know.
Goodness.
It's great.
But that was the sidewalks. That was not
just the sidewalks.
Just the sidewalks, not the roads. So
no, it had to be a plow.
I guess, yeah. It must have been. Do you have some pleasant memories that you can share with us about those early days when you were building a family, you were building a life, you were building a career also. You were starting a career.
Yes.
Some of the memories that come back to you of that time, because you were busy. You're going to school, raising a family, and then going to work. Yes. And it was precious little time for yourself.
That's true.
By the way, what do you like to do, and what did you like to do then that you didn't have time for?
Well, I love to go shopping for clothes. And I always liked movies. I didn't get to them. Well, they had a theater in Bayshore. Of course, Brentwood had nothing.
Yes.
And before I worked, when the kids were in school, I could take the bus over. And I would do that just to shop. And I don't remember if I went to the movies over there or not. I know I was quite happy when they opened the theater in Brentwood, but that's kind of been
That didn't last.
Didn't work.
No. Just like they had a Grant's, I think, over in that shopping center that also closed.
Yes.
We've seen so many changes. Who were some of the people that you worked with that when you first started to work in the district?
You mean their names?
Yes.
Well, plenty of them, but right now I can't think.
Do you remember who was principal of the building? You worked in Village, is that where you?
Yes.
In the Village school?
Yeah. Joe Carson was principal. Before him, it was Lula Tito. And I remember some of the teachers.
I dare say that the people that you worked with had been in Brentwood for a while then, when you came, or were they all arrived?
I don't think they lived in Brentwood.
They didn't, Trent.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Reggie did, and you knew Reggie, I suppose. Everybody seemed to know Reggie. He was a shop teacher.
Yes.
He and a bunch of fellas had I guess they rented an apartment or something for a while. Yeah.
Obviously this is before he got married then.
No, his wife was still up in...
Oh, I see. Yes. They hadn't moved their families down yet.
Right. Yeah.
So Reggie Poquet...
Not all of them had got married, but met their future wives here in the district.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. While you were in Village as a nurse teacher, regardless of job description, which I know clearly, indicates what your job was, how did you see your purpose? What was your purpose for being there?
My purpose in being there?
Yeah. How did you define your...
Well, the main purpose would be to take care of any child who came to the office with such and such a complaint, stomach ache, headache,
Yes.
hurt on the playground, whatever.
Okay. Very physically focused on patching people up and taking care of the temperature and whatever else. So,
Right.
did you belong to a teachers organization at some point along the line, to the Brentwood Teachers Organization? We spoke of the early days of the BTA getting started. You now are a member of the retirees of Brentwood Schools,
Yes.
so I wondered if
And
you had been a member of the Brentwood Teachers Organization at some...
I don't remember.
Okay, all right. Let's see. You've answered so many of these questions, Ruth. I'm just skipping ahead here. When you look back at the time that you spent as a nurse teacher, was there something that you can point to with great pride, something that you accomplished that you felt particularly a good satisfaction about?
Well, I remember one year going into the 6th grade classroom, and I was teaching the children about the eye, about vision. And the following year, I asked these kids, if it couldn't have been 6th grade, it must have been 5th grade. I asked these kids if there was anything that they really wanted me to talk about. And one of the children said, yes, could you tell us more about, like you did about the eyes? Maybe they wanted the ears or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed going in the classroom with the kids.
Yeah. That was a regular part of your...
Yes, being a nurse teacher.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Okay. Speaking of the eyes, you certainly had a reason to know and to pay particular attention to that part of the anatomy because of the...
Right.
Because of the family. I guess it was a genetic predisposition that you were fortunate enough to miss.
Yes. I've often thought of that because I was the girl in between two of the girls who got it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a blessing. Ruth, when did you retire?
73.
You did? What is it, 26 years or something? My math is so bad, but you have had quite some practice at being, quote, retired.
Oh, yes.
What have you done since you retired?
Oh, I'm sorry to say not much. I thought I was going to do all this and that and the other thing, but I didn't really... I don't think I made those years worthwhile.
Well, each of us...
I traveled. Like to travel, yes.
Okay. I was going to say, each of us handles it differently. Some people... your husband is very focused on certain things and has made a very different life for himself after he has retired. And many of us have plans that fall down in mid-flight once we retire. But then it becomes a surprise. It becomes something else that we didn't expect. Where did you travel to? You say you traveled.
Well, he didn't like to travel, so my daughter and I, we went to Israel twice.
Really?
We went to Hawaii. And let's see, where else did we go? And then two of my sisters and I, we took the tour from California on up into Canada. And
wonderful.
Oh, yes, it was great.
Talk about an education. That's an education. Traveling is a real eye-opener if you enjoy it.
Oh, yes.
It's important to enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy it, then it can become.
No, he never enjoyed that. He wanted to go just where he could fish.
I believe that. Yes.
But Louise and I had a good time traveling together. And then I also did with my sisters. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's one thing I did accomplish.
I've noticed that retirees from the district or from the Brentwood district seem to have this wanderlust.
Yes.
As soon as we
Zuckerman.
retire, that's right. They're off to Turkey and they're
Yep.
off to France and they're running and going every which way. But there's a wonderful group then that you have to go with that everybody knows. Get to know everybody, has something in common.
Yeah.
They've had some great times.
Yeah, went to Norway and Sweden.
Oh my goodness, you have traveled a lot,
Yes.
Ruth.
My sister and I went there.
Well, that's terrific.
Enjoyed it. Yeah.
So listen, reflecting on what you've accomplished since in the last few years, you've done a great deal of moving around this globe.
Yeah.
You have. The last building assignment that you had was at the village, was it not?
No, I went to Oak Park.
Oh.
I worked at Oak Park my last year.
And who were some of the people that you worked with there?
Jack Hoffman was a principal.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Mary somebody was the attendance officer. Can't remember her last name. And then there was the art teacher. She had also worked in village. What's her name? Not Phoebe, but Phyllis George.
Okay.
Her husband, I think, was shop over here.
Yes.
Well,
And I knew him as well.
yeah.
And I'm struggling to remember his first name, but I did know him. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you retire?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I just figured I'd had enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got the kids through college. That was the big, the big aim, the big goal.
Yes.
To get the kids through college. And so then I think, I hit 55.
Okay.
And
So you had the option, right?
Yes.
You took it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's time to take a deep breath and kick back and now begin to enjoy the next third of your life. And it sounds like you've been doing just that too. Is there anything that you'd like to do with your retirement that you haven't yet accomplished? Do you have any goals other than those other places that you'd like to visit? Because I'm sure that that's one of them. Yeah. Is there anything else that you thought that you might like to accomplish with this time? Okay.
Not anything really. I would like to be able to travel more, but my health failed and I wasn't able to do as much as I wanted to.
Okay. You sounded as if the thing that gave you a great deal of pleasure while you were working was being able to get into the classes with the youngsters.
Well, not exactly that. I am not a loner. I like to be with people.
Yes.
That's what I enjoyed a lot about the work. And I like the kids. I always like the younger children. Well, I like all kids, but I enjoyed working with them, and I enjoyed working with the teachers too.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking about books before and the summer reading and so on of these series, but I wanted to ask you if you had one book in particular that you could mention of the many that you have read that was particularly important to you in your life. Some very profound, that had some profound influence when you read it.
I can't think of any right now.
One in particular, okay.
Of course, some of them that I read so long ago, I know that they meant a lot to me.
Yes.
Can't think of any.
Do you enjoy any of the contemporary books that are available, that are out there now? Do you occasionally?
Well, we read a lot of whodunits, right?
You do. You like.
Yeah.
You like. Yeah, that's my wife likes those kinds of books too.
Yeah.
The mysteries and the.
Fred goes to the library, and that's what he brings home.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you a few of the remaining questions. Let's see. Well, I guess it appears that we have answered so many of the things the questions that I've thrown at you. I'm always remiss to end the interview without asking if there's anything that we haven't discussed that should be mentioned. And so I ask you if there are any questions that I should have asked that I've forgotten to ask, or if there's anything that you'd like to say about this process that we haven't talked about. Is there any unfinished business here, or have we crossed every T and dotted every I as far as you could say?
As far as I can see, I can't think of anything else.
Well, then it's just for me to thank you, Ruth, for allowing me to ask you all these personal questions and to share what continues to be a wonderful life and a marvelous career of service both to Brentwood and to its young people, and to all of us who have had the pleasure of meeting and knowing you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you.